Hey, guys. How's it going? See, front row gets high fives. Good to see. You know what drives me nuts? Drives me absolutely crazy is people who walk around and give high fives. Right? Drives me crazy. Now, what's wrong with what I just did? Okay, anybody know the word for that? It starts with a C. Jared. Nope, I wasn't thinking of that word. Starts with a C. I just something myself. Lucas. I contradicted myself, So, contradiction, consistency. Sorry, my technology's failing me. Okay. Wow, sorry. Contradiction, consistency, these things are important things. And whether it's saying one thing and then doing another, or, well, here's an example in my life. People ask me, do you play golf? And my response to that is yes. People ask me if I'm a golfer. And my response to that is definitely, what do you think? Some of you have faith in me. You shouldn't, but at least not in the area of golf. I am not a golfer. I play golf. I'm a guy who plays golf sometimes, but I'm not a golfer. Do you know what the difference between someone who plays golf and a golfer is? We just talked about it. Consistency. Okay? Now, my issue with golf, I have all the best intentions in the world, but I get up there and, it's like a sprinkler. It's just like, right? It goes every direction. Nick's a golfer. You should see Nick golf. It's really something. He hits the ball, and the ball goes where he's aiming. The ball goes where he wants it to go most of the time, right? A lot more often than mine does, right? So consistency is super important, and it's one of the things that gives us all kinds of credibility and things like that. But when we contradict ourselves, not only are we not being consistent, but we are actually working against what we just got done saying we believe something to be true. Now, for you, in your life, when someone contradicts themselves, whether it's a friend or a teacher or whatever it is, what does that do in you? What does that cause you to do in terms of how you see them as a teacher or as a coach or as a parent or when someone contradicts themselves, what does it do to you? Anybody? Okay, so it makes an impact on how believable or your willingness to believe them, yeah? Trust issues, like, hey, is what you're saying real? Okay, Tate. Wow, so you question their leadership? Like, should they be a leader? If somebody's gonna, contradict themselves, did they know what they were talking about the first time? And because now they're saying the opposite? Carter. Okay, why wouldn't you want to listen to them? Okay, I don't know whether what you're telling me is going to get me in trouble. Is it going to get me hurt? Anybody ever had a friend tell you to do something and then it ended up not being good for you? You're like, oh, what? Bren. So they change their mind, they're wishy-washy, they're flip-floppy, okay, all these things. Now, so consistency is really important. Letting your yes be yes, your no be no. This is one of the things that I struggle with, honestly, is I so badly want to have input into something that sometimes I'll say something that, I probably shouldn't say it as emphatically. It's like I probably shouldn't say it like I know for sure what I'm talking about. There are times I should really go like, hey, you know what? I'm thinking, or hey, maybe it's, but instead I tend to go, oh, well, they should, right? And it ends up impacting my credibility. It ends up impacting my ability to be consistent and to be a man of my word and to say what I mean and mean what I say and all of these things. And so we've been in this letter that a guy named Paul in the Bible, who wrote a bunch of letters to churches all over and to Christians, and he wrote letters to them instructing them on the heart of God and what God is calling them. If people are going to call themselves Christians, then this is what they're called to. Now, that's one of those things in our life where, all right, I'm cool calling myself a Christian, but what about acting like a Christian? What about actually living that out? And sometimes that's where we get into this issue of consistency. Sometimes that's where we get into this issue of contradicting ourselves, contradicting what we say we believe, and then, oh yeah, well, I believe that God says, that in the Bible, God says, don't gossip. But you got to hear what she did. And we start contradicting ourselves, we start going back on what we say, and it leaves people with this impression. And some of you may be here this morning, and you're like, yeah, Christians have a problem with this. Where we say one thing, or we come to youth group, and we're like, yes, Jesus. And then Monday, well, maybe a little bit more of what I think, right? And it's not always malicious. It's not always like you intend to go against God. But our consistency is super important. So Paul is writing this letter to a younger guy named Timothy. And he's trying to help Timothy establish this church in a city called Ephesus. And the church is a little bit all over the place, where there are leaders who are not leading appropriately. There's people who are leading who shouldn't be leading. There are, everything's kind of just all over the place. And so Paul is writing to Timothy and going, look, here are some important things when it comes to leadership in the church. And we've been talking through these things, and they go, there are these lists that anybody who desires to be in leadership in church desires a noble thing. It's a good thing. And then he lays out these requirements for those who are going to be in leadership in the church. But again, I want to remind us, it doesn't mean that the rest of us are off the hook. It doesn't mean like, oh, okay, well, a leader, in the church has to be above reproach. And you guys remember what above reproach means? No? Blameless. Okay? So a leader in the church is supposed to live in a way that nobody could even bring an accusation against them. Okay? So when I go up and I high five the guys and I'm like, hey man, I hate people who give high fives. You could absolutely bring an accusation against me about, Jeff doesn't always do what he says. Or sometimes Jeff does things that he says the opposite. And so a leader is supposed to live above reproach, blameless. Now, it doesn't mean that you are actually going to be blameless. It doesn't mean that you're required to live perfectly. It means that our heart is in a place where we're going, God, lead me. And if I get into a situation where I did overspeak, I did stretch the truth, I didn't do something I said that I was going to do, am I willing to go and acknowledge that and be like, you know what? I was wrong. I said that like I knew what I was talking about, and I really didn't. You know what? I told you that I would do this for you, and I didn't. When maybe in my heart what I want to do is be like, oh, well, I didn't say I would go to the store. I said, hey, well, I know where a store is. Are we willing to live with such integrity that there's no way that somebody's going to be able to blame us and charge us with, you know what, their heart's bad? Because they say one thing and then they do another. And as I said before, this is not just a thing of like, oh, well, only the leaders in the church. The leaders in the church, you're required. These are requirements of you if you're going to be a leader in the church. But these are also things in life. If you're going to call yourself a Christian, that this isn't to be taken lightly. This isn't like, hey, if you feel like it. Chase, if you're in the mood to, have integrity and be honorable. Bobby, if you want to treat people kindly, if you want to, well, that's up to you. For any who would call themselves Christians, this is a charge in our life. This is what we are called to, so that we can live consistently with what the Bible calls us to. And if we say we love Christ and we call ourselves a Christian, it means that we acknowledge that this is the word of God to us, and we believe this to be the word of God from us. And so that means I don't get to live in contradiction to this. I need to live with consistency. And the reality is that in our faith, we can do the same kind of thing that I do with golf. I don't hate golf. I'm not just like, stupid golf, sometimes I'll play. But man, I'm not going out there and practicing. Nick, how much do you practice a week? Like in the season, how much are you, or whenever you're practicing the most? Every day? Come on, every day? You have to every day? I mean, take a day off. Come on, there's other stuff you could be doing, right? And all right, and so this is where what Nick is willing to do is go, no, this is important. And so I'm going to put in the time, I'm going to put in the effort, I'm going to try it. This is going to be important to me. And so that's why he gets to call himself a golfer and I don't. I don't get to go play 3 times a year and be like, oh yeah, I'm a golfer. Got the glove. I got the very fashionable shoes, right? I've got, the clubs that I've had for 19 years, and they were actually, 47 years old when I got them, right? I don't get to do that. And if I try and do that, if I were to try and convince any of you that I'm a golfer, you'd be like, no. And that would impact many other things, even if maybe some of the other things are true. If I were to stand up here and say, I'm a baseball player. I don't just play baseball, I'm a baseball player. I have the skills of a baseball player. Well, now, based on my claim that I'm a golfer, right, you would probably be like, yeah, he's probably not. Yeah, he's probably like, right? And now, people don't know what to think. We can do the same thing in our faith. When we pick and choose and be like, oh, well, here it says don't murder. Okay. Back here it says, love those that are unlovable. I don't know about that. It might hurt my popularity. Back here it says, forgive those who offend you. Well, I'll forgive Ariel, because, I want to be friends, and, she seems really nice. But no way am I forgiving Zach, that guy, right? And now, all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, Jeff, what part of this is real to you? And we do this in our life, and this is what we demonstrate to the world when we do that. We go, oh, wait, Christian. I guess being a Christian means you just, give up your lunchtime one day a week and go sit in a classroom with other Christians at the Christian club. Maybe that's what being a Christian is. Okay, because they're a jerk the rest of the time. So consistency, again, not perfectly. You're not going, when it says blameless, it doesn't mean that you're going to, you have to rise to this level of don't ever do anything wrong. You're going to screw up. Where's your heart when you screw up? Is your desire to continue modeling for people a consistency of going, you know what? My desire is to love people the way that God calls me to love people. And when I was rude right back there, I don't want you to think that I think that's fine. And so we pursue this and we ask God to meet us where we're at in our brokenness so that we can live lives of consistency. So he goes through all of these things, okay? Oh boy. If someone aspires to be a church leader, he desires an honorable position. So a church leader must be a man whose life is above reproach. He must be faithful to his wife. He has to exercise self-control, live wisely, have a good reputation, enjoy having guests in his home, must be able to teach, not be a heavy drinker or be violent. He must be gentle, not quarrelsome, and not love money. Okay. And again, That's not just for leaders in the church. Okay, it's mandatory for them, but this is the call of God on each of our lives. And then he continues. He must manage his own family well, having children who respect and obey him. For if a man cannot manage his own household, how can he take care of God's church? A church leader must not be a new believer, because he might become proud and the devil would cause him to fall. Also, people outside the church must speak well of him so that he will not be disgraced and fall into the devil's trap. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of respect. This is a huge call on all of our lives, and what this speaks to is consistency. Okay? To manage something, whatever it is, managing things in your life takes consistency. Managing golf in Nick's life takes the consistency of going to practice, going and playing. Managing consistency with your grades means spending the time studying, doing your homework. Okay? And so here, what he's going is, look, consistency in Christian character starts in the home. Now, he's talking about specifically for fathers and their kids. But at the root of this, one of the reasons he uses this as an example is home is kind of it's the base. It's the anchor. It's the thing in our lives where at your house, you're probably most real. It doesn't mean that you're not real other places. It doesn't mean that, and maybe there are fake things that you do while you're at home, to trick your parents or whatever it is. But this idea of at home, that you be consistent, has to start at the core level, at the base level. And he says, look, consistency of Christian character starts at home. And that's not always going to be easy. That's not always what you're going to want to do. But think about, okay, at your house, are you really trying to impress anybody? Probably not. At your house, are you probably the most familiar with the people who live there with you, other than everybody else? I mean, yeah, you'll have friends, and maybe you've known friends for a few years and things like that. Man, they don't live with you. And so there's this consistency that needs to happen, especially in situations where it's like, man, I'm comfortable. I don't have anything to prove, so I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to be whatever comes out. And so my question to you is, what comes out? When you're comfortable, when you don't feel like you've got anything to prove, what comes out? And is it the kind of character that God calls people who are going to call themselves Christians? And maybe you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, and you're looking at it, you're like, yeah, I've seen some Christians. Yeah, I know some Christians who don't really seem even as nice as people who don't call themselves Christian. And you question that consistency. And I want you to know here this morning that that's not what Christians are called to. So if you're here this morning and you've been disillusioned by a Christian, if you've been hurt by someone who claims to love Jesus, this morning I want to tell you that's not what they're called to. And God doesn't look at that and be like, yeah, it's fine, you probably deserved it. It's not what God calls Christians to. If you're here this morning and you call yourself a Christian, what does that look like? When you're relaxed, when you've got nothing to prove, because here's the reality, you can fool me. You can come to youth group and you can control yourself enough not to, say the F word for an hour and a half. You can control yourself when somebody's bugging you, not to just be like, dude, get away, you're annoying. All right, you'll be like, you can fool me. You can fool people on social media. You can make you seem just like the most wonderful person. You can make yourself look generous. You can make yourself look kind. You can make yourself look thoughtful. What comes out when you're relaxed? What comes out when you've got nothing left to prove? I've been married for 22 years at this point. That's a while. It's a while. And I remember when Laura and I first started dating, man, I was all about trying to impress her. Trying to think that I was this kind of guy, or I was this kind of guy, and I would okay. I lived in Altaloma. I lived in Fontana. She lived in South Ontario. I would drive down to her house and leave a note on her windshield. It's like 30 minutes each way. She's gonna love that. I'm good. I'm good, right? And then she'd call me later, be like, oh, I got the note on my car. It was so nice. Oh, I love you. Actually, my wife has never talked like that ever in her life. And she would, and I would be like, yes, it worked. 22 years of marriage. Not as natural. Still important. It may not be the thing where I have to I've got to win her over. I won her over. I got her. But man, that consistency of love, that consistency of, in simple ways, leaving a note, sending a text for no reason. These are the kinds of things. Who do you become when you're relaxed? Who do you become when you don't have to impress anybody, or people are already impressed? And then you've already given them an image of who you are. How are you going to continue to demonstrate that? Your kindness, your gentleness, your forgiveness, your thoughtfulness, whatever it may be. That consistency is huge. That consistency is so important. And that, if you want to know who are you, think about who you are when you're relaxed. What kind of person are you? You putting people down? You making fun of people? Are you still generous? Are you still doing stuff for each other? What does that look like when you're relaxed? And so here, Paul is going, look, it's important the way they are at home. It's important how they lead their family. In your life. Okay, just like we talked about last week where he talked about, in marriage. Okay, you guys aren't in a time in life right now where you've got a household to run. You are not in charge of your household. You're not supposed to be. But consider this character in your heart. What kind of person are you? When you're relaxed, when you're not trying to win somebody over, when you're not trying to impress, who are you? Because that is at the core of consistency. That's what's going to point to what kind of person, and I'll just tell you this, as you start dating, as you start looking for people, this is going to be really important. Because let me tell you, the first date, it's really easy to be impressive. It's really easy to be impressive. It's super easy to I'm going to open the door. I'm going to close it. I'm going to say, here, have a seat. It's really easy to talk nice through dinner and ladies, and you're talking and you're being sweet. And I'm about to mess you up. You ready? Here's how you should judge somebody you date. You ready? Here it is. Pro tip here. Pro tip. I'm telling you, some of you are going to be like, oh. Pro tip. You know how to judge somebody that you're going to date, whether they're dateable? Find out how they treat their siblings. Find out how they treat their siblings. If they're always putting their siblings down, if they're greedy with their siblings, if they're always bugged and wishing they'd get away, let me tell you this. One day, if your relationship goes long enough, you'll be the sibling. You'll get treated the same way. Now, people change. People grow up. People mature. People recognize their mistakes. Hopefully. But man, I know people who got married after first dates. I know people who got married to the show. And it's so destructive. When I do premarital counseling, the most concerning couple, the couple that makes all the red flags go up, is the couple that comes in and goes, oh yeah, we don't really fight about anything. Okay, settle in. Who are you when you relax? Who are you when you're not trying to impress? Here, Paul is going, hey, in leadership, the thing to look at, if a person's going to be a leader, look at their home. Look at who they are around the people they're most comfortable with. And it will tell you something about their character. And again, they're not going to be perfect. Do not look for the perfect person. If you find the perfect person, they're probably not being real. They're not going to be a perfect person. But is that person, when they mess up, willing to acknowledge it? I hope I never, and I'll just be personal with you, I hope I never come off to you like I think I'm the perfect father. That, oh yeah, I always treat Emma and Carter and Nathan patiently and kindly. I mean, you guys, I am an absolute train wreck at times. Hopefully, my heart is in a place of going, okay, I recognize that that's not good, and I try and be there, but even that is a battle sometimes. Who are you when nobody's looking? Who are you with the people that you're most comfortable with? Because the reality of it is, the brokenness that you try and hide so that you can be impressive will always end up coming out, I promise. So you may be able to fool me. You may be able to fool your followers on social media. You may be able to fool the people that you spend just a few hours a day with at school. But any meaningful relationship, and if you ever look to be in leadership, it will always end up coming out every single time. You will be found out. So this is why the call is surrender that to God. Invite him into those circumstances, and you know where you're a mess. You know the stuff where you're like, yeah, I have a bad attitude about that. Will you trust that God is going to come alongside you? And then he says something interesting. A leader in the church must not be a new believer because he might become proud and the devil would cause him to fall. Must not be a new believer. What this is talking about is the importance of growing in your faith. How important it is that your faith matures. And this is not something where it's like, oh, well, it's fine. In Ephesians, another letter from Paul, he describes it this way, that when you mature in your faith, you won't be blown back and forth by every new teaching. It's important that you mature in your faith, that you grow. I'm so glad you guys are here. I know that for it may be the same like, Sunday, time for church, and it's kind of like this little performance that you've got to come do. Or, Wednesday night, I got to go, okay, I'll go to youth group because, what else am I going to do? Or my parents want me to or whatever. But the maturing in our faith is something that we do together. I mean, God's word says, hey, don't stop coming together. Don't stop meeting together with other believers, other train wrecks, other people who need Christ, because you got to grow. You got to mature in your faith and not just play the Sunday school game and be like, oh, you know what, I'm fine doing this. I'm fine just going through the motions. We are supposed to mature. Hey, guys, thanks. We are supposed to grow in not just, I know the Bible. I memorized a verse. We're supposed to grow in this, in what God calls us to, so that we can live a life of consistency. So that we're not saying one thing on Wednesday night and then living a completely different thing on Thursday morning. And it's so important that we grow in our faith. He says people outside the church should speak well of him so that he won't be disgraced and fall into the devil's trap. People outside the church. Now, again, we've just been talking about you can fool anybody. Okay. Well, Have you ever met one of those people who, like, you see the way they act, you know they go to church, you know they call themselves a Christian, but then you see the way they act, and you sit back and you're like, oh my gosh, I hope they don't tell anybody they're a Christian. Because they're going to give Christians a bad name. They're going to give Jesus a bad name. And we tend to look at other people and in areas that we don't struggle with. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I don't have a problem with rage, and so I'm going to go ahead and look at him and be like, oh, man, he's a rager. And, man, I hope he doesn't tell anybody he's a Christian because, Christians shouldn't rage. You guys, there are times that I'm that person. That based on my attitude, based on something that maybe I don't ever say out loud, but based on where my heart is at, man, I hope people don't know I'm a Christian. Because I'm going to give Christ a bad name. So here, Paul is going, look, you need to have a good reputation with people outside the church so that they don't see this contradiction, this lack of consistency in what you say you believe and what you do. And there's also this thing of, like, yeah, you can play the game and get everybody to think you're the good boy. Get everybody to think you're the good girl. And then your reputation is just that you're the good boy, you're the good girl. And your pride rises up and you go, man, look at me. Look how important everybody thinks I am. Look, I've got everybody convinced that I'm just awesome. And we end up broken and missing out on so much. There's this quote by a guy named Kent Theory, and he says this: behaviors will exhibit convictions of the person living them out. Behaviors will exhibit the convictions of the person living them out. How you act does matter. But what about not making it an act? Who are you when you're not trying to impress people is going to tell you a lot about your heart. And so looking at that, where do you need God to meet you? And I want to encourage you to really consider that. And to not just walk out the doors and be like, okay, I'll figure it out later. But you may need to invite people in to support you in that. You may need to invite people to hold you accountable to that. Imagine going to your mom and dad and being like, hey, when you hear me talking rude to my sister, will you just point it out to me? Because honestly, sometimes we get blind spots and we don't even see it. What about asking friends, hey, when I start to gossip, when I start to talk about somebody, will you shut me down? Will you just tell me, hey, we don't need that? Or time out. Or whatever little symbol you need or whatever it is. What about that? Is walking in integrity, being blameless, important enough for you to do that? So that you don't contradict yourself. Every day you walk around high-fiving people and then walking away going, I hate people who high-five. You come to church, you're like, oh, Lord, I need you. Every hour I need you. Except for this hour and the next hour and the next 23 hours because I got it. And we contradict ourselves and there's no consistency. So would you bow your heads? And each one of us in this room is in a different place. All of us have something that we need God to intervene in some way. So none of us are exempt from this, but it really is a matter of your heart and a condition of where you're willing to let your heart go. For those of you here who have been hurt by Christians, for those of you who have been the victim of a Christian contradiction, I want to encourage you to consider what forgiveness would look like. And I'm not saying that lightly. I know that there are some of you, you've been hurt deeply by people who say they love Jesus. And you're holding on to it and you carry it around. Will you consider that God loves you. He wants you to know the truth, and he wants to set you free. And will you receive that freedom? For those of you that are here, and you absolutely live a double life. You call yourself a Christian, you come to youth group, you're super involved, maybe whatever it may be, and you walk out of these doors and you are a terror. You hurt your friends, you talk about your enemies, you destroy your family. Are you willing to invite God in to do the healing that needs to happen in your heart so that you don't keep contradicting yourself? Will you allow him to speak the truth to your heart? So Lord, right now, as we are all gathered together, each of us broken in some way, each of us contradicting ourselves in some way, God, we ask you to set us free. We want to live lives that demonstrate your love. We don't want to contradict ourselves. We don't want to contradict you. And so, God, I pray for each person in this room, whatever you need to do, to make yourself real to us in a way that would allow you, where we would allow you to come alongside us and change us and shape us. And that we would recognize the leadership opportunities that each one of us has in the lives of others to live for you. And God, I pray that you would set us free, that we would hear your voice, that we would hear your conviction when we start to gossip, when we start to talk about somebody negatively, when we start to be involved in stuff that is not going to speak well of you, God, that you would remind us of what you call us to. So God, I believe that you can do that miraculously in our life. I believe that you want to do that miraculously in our life, and so we invite you to do that. In Jesus' name, amen. If you guys want to talk, if you want somebody to pray with or encourage, we are here for you. I want to also encourage you to maybe find somebody. It might be somebody in this group. It might be somebody in your family. It might be somebody at your school to partner with you in this. And seriously, ask them, like, hey, will you just gently nudge me when I start to do this? Or when you hear me do this, will you just point it out to me so that I can grow in this area of my life, because I don't want to just keep going. Cool? Love you guys. See you for back to school extravaganza on Wednesday.